give up our rights as American citizens in order to be protected from terrorism and/or crime? That is our topic today on The Opinion, the talk show where your opinions matter. I am Mirna Santiago, your host, and joining me today as my co-host is lecturer and member of the Comcast family here as host of Let's Talk Writing, Vin Dacquino.
Oh, thank you, and welcome. And our guest today is David DeRita. David, you're not only a man about town, but you're a reporter. And you keep your thumb on the news. And I know one of your pet peeves is this whole thing about terrorism and what the government is doing to protect us with terrorism. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for that intro, Vin. We're going to talk a little bit today about just that, whether we have to give up our rights under the Constitution and the rights granted to us as American citizens in order to be protected from what the government calls terrorism and crime here in our country. So we have the Patriot Act, we've had these numerous laws, the organizations like TSA and NSA that have been proliferated and created after 9/11, all under the guise of protecting us from terrorism. So now, of course, we find out through WikiLeaks and a few other organizations that the government intrusion, if you will, has reached unprecedented levels where the government is actually going through mail. It can grab your physical body and stop and frisk you through those types of laws. It can go through your financial records through the Patriot Act. The NSA can actually go through your phone records. So, which brings me back to Vin. Do we have to give up our rights in order to be protected?
You know, I grew up during the Cold War, which was frightening because one of the things that I heard over and over again is if you lived in Russia, they would know everything you're doing. You couldn't talk. Don't you dare say anything against anyone because you're always being watched. And I said, whoa, thank goodness I'm an American. That would never happen here. Well, guess what? It's happening. And I'm as concerned as you are, David, but I'm also concerned about the fact that there's another thing that's happening in this country. People are getting killed in the streets. I'll never forget the time that I was in a teacher's meeting and a teacher came in and said, oh my goodness, a plane just hit one of the towers. And then a few minutes later said, another plane hit another tower. Well, that's pretty scary. And what do we do to prevent this kind of thing from happening? Do we give up our rights to stop it from happening? David?
I believe that there does seem to be a kind of, I believe it has to be mutually exclusive in terms of our country was founded on the ideal that we should be allowed the rights of free speech, privacy, happiness, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These are infringing on our rights. I mean, in terms of privacy, you have the stop and frisk acts where people will basically just be randomly pulled over by a police officer and searched. I mean, it's a violation physically and of your personal belongings. You have your emails, you have your phones. I've actually been hearing video games. If you go on a massively multiplayer game online, they'll look at you there. Xbox has the online components. They'll look at you there. You really are not safe from prying eyes anymore. And that, I believe, is not what our country was founded on.
Well, I have to disagree with you on that one, David, because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I honestly don't think that you could either have, that you have to have freedom and yet the government can't protect you in whatever way they can. I think that you have to be able to give up some of these things. Frankly, I don't mind going through a scanner at the airport if I know that I'm not going to get blown to bits once I'm on the airport. Once I'm on the plane, people complain about that. They complain about the TSA agents and the fact that they frisk you if you don't agree to go through the scanners, or that they can open up your luggage and look through it. Look all you want. I don't have anything to hide. I really don't care. You know, I have these discussions with brown and black people with the stop and frisks because it seems to have this component that if you look a certain way in this country, you get stopped and frisked more. Stop and frisk me 100 times if you want. I don't have any guns. I don't have any knives. I don't have drugs. Stop and frisk me. And I understand that people feel that it's an infringement upon their rights. I understand that people feel, well, it's an inconvenience. But for me, I would much rather that than have to go through some of the things that this country has already seen. I would much rather give up some of my Second Amendment rights, because people complain about that too. People say, I have the right to bear arms. I can carry an assault weapon if I want to. I can, carry a machine gun. But at the same time, if someone walks into a school and kills 50 children, then they're complaining, well, why isn't the government doing more? Right. You have to give up something in order to get something back. And if I need to give up the right to walk down the street without being stopped and frisked every once in a while, but it keeps someone with an assault weapon from walking into my child's school and killing him, I will give that up.
Mirna, I totally agree with you, but I do have some reservations. My concern is who's watching me, and do they have ulterior motives? And again, are they prejudiced? Are they picking on me because of the way I look or the way I sound, or because I may have said something that they didn't like? And that was one of the concerns during the Cold War as well. That what if what I say is misconstrued? What if I didn't mean that? Is there someone out there judging me who should not be a judge? So at one hand, I want people looking over my shoulder to protect my back, but I don't want people looking over my shoulder all day long.
Just to look over your shoulder.
Yeah,
exactly.
Just to look over my shoulder because they don't like what I'm doing and it doesn't fit in what they have. We have to also be very careful that those people out there are doing what they should be doing and they're not stepping on our rights. So in that way, David, I see what you're saying. Well, but then again, on the other side, I don't want to be killed either to protect my rights.
Well, David, I had a question to ask you, because I know you mentioned some of the statutes that are in place, and I'm going to ask you to sort of expound upon one of them that you've mentioned to me before. And if you can talk a little bit about that statute and what it does, and if it does define terrorism, because a lot of people like me feel that, well, if you're not a terrorist, you're not going to be targeted. If you're not a terrorist, who cares if you're looking through your email? In fact, they wouldn't be interested in my email. They're not going to be looking through it. So tell me, do any of these statutes say this is what a terrorist is and this is what we're looking at?
Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of these different statutes, one in particular that had occurred about 2 years ago, 2012, is very disturbing. It was part of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which is basically a provision, an annual provision to set up budgetary concerns for the defense line. And they usually will put little addendums in there, little extra laws. One of the provisions they have in there is that the government can now detain any person they suspect for terrorism indefinitely without a trial. That includes U.S. citizens. That, to me, creates a slippery slope where now you have this kind of innocuous definition of terrorism, where if you have someone who maybe just out of pure curiosity, say, goes on YouTube and looks at a training video for terrorism, someone from Iraq and Iran who has these home movies of people being trained in the Taliban or whatever, you're being monitored now. The government is now seeing what you do online. Who's to say that that's not going to raise a red flag and label you as a possible threat? We live in the age now where it's not so much about catching the bad guys, but preventing them from doing things. And being labeled as a threat just through small, curious acts like that, or even posting something on a forum, criticizing the president, criticizing the army, possibly agreeing with some of the more outlandish or extremist views, even if you don't espouse violence. That's going to label you as someone to be watched. And if you step out of line, even if you don't realize where that line is, it's going to be a problem.
So you're saying there's no threshold that's established in these laws? So
it's a muddled threshold at the very least.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things we have to be careful of is that the people in power don't abuse their power. For example, I mean, it would never happen, but creating a traffic jam just because someone doesn't vote for you. But there's things that can be done out there, and that's what's scary.
Yeah.
The scary thing is what they're able to do. And if it's just an assumption, now, are you guilty? Innocent until proven guilty? Well, if they're looking over my shoulder and they're checking everything I'm doing, then I'm already a suspected criminal, so they're checking everything I'm doing, and they're interpreting what I'm doing, whether they want to call it right or wrong, as you say, David. If they're watching what games I play and they're saying, hey, he's playing violent games, he must be a violent person. I want to know who's judging me.
What's going on? Now, I also want to raise a little bit about, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this tepid response that we've gotten to the whole NSA scandal. I think there's more outrage outside of the country, with other countries kind of saying, well, what is going on, and the fact that a government agency, that an American governmental agency is spying on its own people and also spying on heads of states of other countries. But in this country, it's been very tepid, to say the least. And I know from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, when people were marching in the streets for civil rights, they were marching against wars. I'm really surprised that people are so apathetic, and I'm guessing it's because they kind of feel like me. After you go through an event like 9/11, it's very hard to get back to that pre-9/11 level of confidence that we had in this country. I mean, now I live in fear. Like I said, I don't mind. You can go through whatever you want as long as you can guarantee me that I'm going to get from point A to point B, which they cannot anyway.
That's right. There are no guarantees.
But what is up with the tepid response? Why do you think that people just don't seem to care that the NSA is doing this?
I think we're going back to, again, that Cold War concept. They reversed it. Now those other countries are saying about us what we said about them. And now some of us are looking at that and going, that was no big deal. But now we're on the other side, and it is a big deal. And I think we're so used to those things happening that we're just like, well, it's not so bad. Although, again, it's mixed. There's a lot of Davids out there who are saying exactly the same thing. I don't want your nose in my business. And they're right in many ways. But I also don't want anyone's bomb in my living room.
So, well, David, let's get to you, because you, as a writer, you must have the who, what, whens, and wheres of a lot of this NSA stuff. So, what has been your feeling on on people's reactions to this? Because I know. I sort of get the feeling from outside, that a lot of the heads of states are really angry about it. They're like, how dare you come into my country and spy on me and listen to my conversations and emails and what have you. But we don't seem to have that here. So what is your take on it?
Well, I believe, again, it goes back to what had happened in 9/11. It was not just the specific event, but just an entire mindset that was created. I believe not even just the reversal of the Cold War, that this goes even beyond what we've seen in the Cold War. Back when we were conducting the war on terrorism, we were billing ourselves as the fighters of freedom, that we would uphold the virtues of liberty and democracy. And now, years later, the Chancellor of Germany is finding out that she had her phone tapped by the president. I mean, that's first off, that's damaging trust within our allied nations, but more to the point of citizens' reactions to this, we have changed the fundamental ways we've conducted war, aggression, violence. We don't have the clear-cut days of one side versus the other necessarily. We have factions, we have fringe groups, we have cells that not necessarily completely attached to the one group, but could be a fringe group. We have so many different ideologies, and we have people who are U.S. citizens. Technically, they have come to this country, they have filed the paperwork, they've gone through the motions, and they are U.S. citizens, yet are still attached to those their nations, their ideology, their extremism. The problem is that things have changed so much that we don't really know how to deal with this anymore, and we are dealing with a kind of aggression where it can happen at any time. 9/11 was a regular day, and then that happened, and now we don't know when the next strike will come, from who, from where, we had Boston bombings, the Boston Marathon. These 2 kids, are they connected to anything? Are they just they have their own ideas of extremism? Are they actually connected to any specific organization? We don't know. All we know is they were able to make bombs.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to deal with that kind of unpredictability.
I'll tell you an interesting thing about Snowden. Not too long ago, we created what is called the Schools Against Violence legislation, where we created laws to protect the children in our schools. And it's pretty lengthy. Well, one of the things in there has always been of interest to me. It's the whistleblower law. And what they say is that this law, this legislation, protects whistleblowers and must protect whistleblowers because when things happen, we can't always hear them. And you could be the best teachers in the world, but you can't be aware of every single thing that's going on in every boy's room, every girl's room, every tunnel, every parking lot. So we need people to help us watch without their becoming punished. That's what the legislation says. Protect the whistleblowers. And Snowden was, in fact, a whistleblower.
All right, well, let me loop back around
Okay.
to this. And I'm going to respond to what you're saying also because I have a point to make about that, about sort of the overreaching nature of this surveillance, if you will, by the NSA. And my question to you is, do you think this whole overreaching, this now that we're trying to get our ears and eyes in the nooks and crannies of everywhere in the world, other countries everywhere, has to do with the fact that we felt like we were caught with our pants down when it came to 9/11? Basically, that we were caught unawares. We were off somewhere, and all of a sudden we had these 2 planes destroy one of our greatest national monuments. So to speak. So now all of a sudden we have to listen everywhere, have our ears to every door because we don't know when it could happen again. But going back to the Snowden, and I wanted to ask both of you this question. You mentioned Snowden. We had WikiLeaks. I call him Assange, but I noticed that you call him Assange, so I'm not sure what the right what the right pronunciation is now. But they call themselves whistleblowers, like you said, and they're saying they should, they're arguing that they should be protected under the laws because they basically blew something wide open that the American people didn't know about. People are calling them traitors. Okay, other people are calling them heroes. They're saying we did not know this was happening, and thank you for raising it. What do you think? You're calling them whistleblowers as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm mixed because what happens is that the whistleblowers help us. Now, they're not watching us. They're watching the watchers who are watching us. And those watchers are doing some things that I certainly question. But are they jeopardizing our security? Is Snowden saying things and doing things that hurt us even more than what they're doing? And that's the real question. And again, we're back at a mixed bag. On one hand, we want to know if people are doing things they shouldn't be doing. And on the other hand, are they doing things they should be doing that will be jeopardized by this? And that's the question, David, that we do need people telling on people, but we do need people watching us. I want people covering my back. But again, I don't want them snooping over my shoulder every minute either.
So, David, for you then, Snowden, Assange, whistleblowers, heroes, traitors, what do you think?
Based on what I've been hearing from them and their testimony, I do believe that there was idea of altruism from them in terms of what they were trying to do was the right thing. They were trying to uncover scandals, problems, the tapping of the phones for different nations. There have been major scandals within the war on terror. There have been news reports of soldiers mistreating civilians. There was that thing about the soldier standing over a dead body and just being lewd and disgusting. We do live now in the age of the digital age, where things have come to the point of computers now have taken over our lives. We now live in the age of information is lightning fast. And I think on some level, there have been accusations that someone like Julian Assange, who works with WikiLeaks, has kind of a bit of an ego on him, and that he believes that what he was doing is important and revolutionary. And to an effect, it is. And I do believe on some level that what they were trying to do was the right thing. They were trying to uncover these scandals. But there is the problem of the individual quality. These people who may have a kind of agenda all their own of trying to do something out of the ordinary. There is the specter, though, that now that these operations have been uncovered, what is that going to mean for our troops? What is that going to mean for, do we have agents throughout the world who have been compromised? So it could be a good thing on paper, but in practice, it can potentially be damaging.
For me, I would call them traitors. I would say that they pose a real compromise now to national security. I don't think you can disclose those types of documents that WikiLeaks did, which really did talk about, CIA operations and what was going on in other countries, and not compromise national security that way. And if it was any other way, obviously this is the digital age, and lines are a little bit blurred now. But if this was, 100 years ago, and Julian Assange was going to, someone who was behind enemy lines and saying, well, this is where the soldiers are, that would be a traitor, plain and simple.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be no question about it. The fact that he's letting papers out and letting these people know where the positions are, where the operations are, where the operatives are, I don't think it changes any. In my opinion, he's a traitor. So we actually have to move on to our lightning round.
Okay.
Sorry, Vin, but you can kind of squeeze it into the. So our lightning round for this episode is. It has to do with this topic. It has to do with President Obama and whether he has lost credibility here in this country and overseas, in other countries, due to this NSA scandal. Because now it's become clear that the United States is listening in on conversations, that it's surveilling other heads of state, which has really left a bad taste in a whole lot of people's mouths. So I'm going to start with you, Vinny, because I did cut you off.
I would say that there's no question this has definitely hurt him. Not the only thing that's hurt him. I think he's in trouble in terms of whether the American public trust him completely anymore. He campaigned on the idea of change. Well, we've had some change, some serious change. There's no question that it did hurt him. And there's people out there wondering, what's going to happen now? And now we have our allies are becoming our enemies, like exactly what David said. So in that way, yes, we're in trouble.
On that end. David, what do you think? Do you think it's hurt his credibility?
I believe the specific scandal has indeed hurt his credibility, but I think it goes further than either just this scandal or even just Obama himself. Please do realize that a president doesn't work in a vacuum. He has his advisors, he has his cabinet members, he has the entire government, the Senate, the House of Representatives. And these people push through laws. They craft laws, they add things to different bills, they withhold laws, try and block legislation. Like I had mentioned before, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, was not Obama's project necessarily. It was the people on the ground floor who added this bill on, and he signed it with reservation. So my problem with that quote in and of itself, with reservation, he had said that he would promote change and would try to work outside of what the government would usually be doing, and then he just kind of folded and said this had to be happening anyway, even though, like he said, he wasn't completely on board with it. The bigger problem is, though, is that as far as I've seen, there has been pretty much no opposition to that and a lot of the other projects that have been going on behind the scenes. It's really not so much about the president in and of himself, it's more of the entire government. It's now the mindset of whoever you are, Democrat or Republican, we live in the age now where this kind of behavior is expected and accepted. So it's not just one person that's causing the problem.
Well, for my opinion, I think he has definitely lost credibility. I think he campaigned on the issue of transparency in government. That was his thing, and he put himself out there as a lay person, as someone who hadn't been in government for so many years, and he said there's so many layers to government, there's so many secrets, so many things that are hidden from the people, and I'm going to be transparent. You elect me, I'm going to be transparent. Well, and it's one thing, like you said, he doesn't work in a vacuum. It's not just him, but he is the head of the government. He is the face of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to come out there and tell me, give me your vote, and I will be transparent with you. I will let you know what's happening. And then now I find out that, you and your administration have more layers than an onion. I am never going to get to the core of that thing. There's no transparency going on. And the fact that he hasn't come out, and it took him months with the NSA scandal to come out and say, oh, I'm going to fix this. It still hasn't been fixed. You still haven't told me what you're going to fix. Are you going to stop listening to my conversations? Are you going to stop listening to my son's Xbox games? What exactly is it that you're going to do, Obama? So yeah, I definitely think that he's lost credibility. I think he has a lot of work to do to come back from that and to just gain some trust, not just here in the United States, but also now with these other
really
countries. Internationally, who are looking at it and saying, and I'm sure, this surveillance has been going on for years. I'm sure it didn't start with Obama, you're right. It's probably started in many other administrations before him, but now it's blown wide open.
Now it's transparent.
Yeah, now it's transparent.
Ironically, without that.
So that's it. We're done with this episode of The Opinion. For you viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. Please keep writing us, sending us your emails, watching us on YouTube, and leaving us your comments. You can email me at Mirna at theopiniontalkshow.com, and you can also email any of our guests if you have comments about them at theopiniontalkshow@theopiniontalkshow.com. Thank you so much for watching.